Time now to talk sport with Nick Lockyer, who's at the MCG where fans are already lining up.
And they've been lining up for a long time as well. You can see behind my left shoulder here, plenty of members, plenty of them have been lining up camping out since about yesterday afternoon, trying to get the best seat in the house. They're all queuing up, of course, for the AFL Grand Final today between the Hawks and West Coast. The last man to captain the Eagles to a premiership was Chris Judd way back in 2006. Now, I caught up with him earlier in the week and began by asking him how the players would be feeling right now.
Well, for me, I spent most of it just going to the toilet because I was so nervous. But look, they'll get up, they'll have brekkie, they'll have a walk and a bit of a stretch with their teammates. I think almost to a man they'd be incredibly anxious and nervous, but they'd also be excited as well. Some blokes would be trying to control their negative thoughts by overpowering with a positive one. The wiser ones would just accept that thoughts are going to come and go and be trying to avoid buying into any of the stuff going on in their own head and just saving their energies for what's going to happen at the ground. The two experiences I had, I just tried to focus on what an exciting opportunity was and the fact that it was a privilege to be able to take the field on Grand Final day.
You were the last West Coast Premiership captain. How special was it to lift that cup on Grand Final day?
Yeah, incredibly special and just a huge feeling of relief that we'd finally done it. And I think it's one of those things you almost appreciate more and more as time goes on, and not so much just for the premiership, but the shared experience with a group of people that really connects you for the rest of your life.
Do you remember how you were feeling when that final siren went off?
I was just feeling exhausted and relieved, and just ecstatic that we as a group been able to achieve what for most players would have been a lifelong dream.
Of course, the year before it wasn't quite the same feeling. Do you remember how disappointed and devastated you were then?
Yeah, just completely disappointed, but also pretty hopeful that we were going to be good enough to win one. We had a pretty young list, and as disappointing as that result was the year before, it sort of felt like it was more of a speed hump in our quest to try and get a premiership, and that's, I guess, how it panned out.
What do you think the Eagles have to do to beat this Hawthorn outfit?
I think the most important thing they've got to do is to be able to control their emotions and to settle reasonably early in the game. Because the Hawks have been there so many times before, whilst they'll still be excited and nervous, I think they'll slip into playing the way they want to play quite early on into the match. And if West Coast are unable to do that, Hawks will get a sizable lead, and once they've got a lead, they're just so skillful and so well drilled, they're very hard to chase down.
There's a handful of these players chasing a fourth premiership for Hawthorn. Where does this team stand in terms of if it gets the three-peat in the history of the game?
Oh, look, I mean, even if they don't win, I think they're going to be right up there as one of the great teams of all time. And if they were to make it four, then they rightly go down with Melbourne of I think it was the 60s or 50s under Norm Smith's reign, Richmond during the 70s and 80s, and I guess the Hawks of the 80s as well as one of the all-time great teams.
You've played against this Hawthorn team. How good are they?
When I look at Hawthorn, it's hard. You obviously admire the players and the coaches, but I think their whole club is something to be admired, and just a very well-run organisation. And I really admire how players at Hawthorn like Luke Hodge and Sam Mitchell carry the heaviness of success, as if it's nothing at all. So you've never seen signs from any of those guys that success does weigh them down, and I'd probably look at it more that if you've been successful in the past, that's evidence to say that you know what you're doing and that you know what works, and that's usually a pretty good indicator that you'll be successful in the future again.
Well, you have a bit of an outsider's perspective now. How do you see the game playing out, and have you got a tip for us?
Well, I think West Coast have the youthful legs and a level of excitement which may be advantageous, but the Hawks are just so skillful and so clinical in the way they go about it. So my heart definitely says West Coast, but every time I tip against the Hawks, I end up with egg on my face. So I think they might get there in a close one.
Newly retired as well. How is retirement going for you?
It's going well. Yeah, it's been enjoyable making the transition from player to, I guess, person. And I've got my last lap of honour of the G on Saturday, so I'm looking forward to doing that with the kids.
How do you think you'll be feeling when you're going around in that convertible this afternoon?
Look, I don't know. I think any time you get to take the field on Grand Final day, even if it's not as a player, it's a privilege, and I'm sure I'll enjoy cruising around in the back of the Hilux.
That was, of course, Chris Judd there, the former West Coast Premiership captain. Now, he was tipping, of course, West Coast with his heart, but his head said Hawthorn. Speaking to a lot of West Coast fans in Melbourne yesterday, they tended to agree with him. The game kicks off here at 2:30 p.m. and the gates open. Gates open at 9:30 this morning.